Mm-hmm.
So I'm CEO, and my argument is that the EU's or European Union's Article 13 has detrimental effects that outweigh the beneficial effects. So for those who don't know what the EU's Article 13 contains, it's part of the European Union Directive on Copyright and Digital Single Market. It essentially is a copyright plan that the EU has proposed, and it contains multiple articles, but it's overall informally known as Article 13, as Article 13 is the most controversial article. And as to what Article 13 does that makes it controversial, a Wired article from the UK actually covers this pretty well. It states, requires online platforms to filter or remove copyrighted content from their websites. So instead of making the users liable for the copyrighted content, the platforms are. So if you see someone else uploading your content, the actual platform would get in trouble instead of the user. So some of the points I'm going to cover today is, well, the first one is that our fair use is threatened by the Article 13. And the second point will be how social media relies heavily on shared material that is at risk under Article 13. And the last point being that the Article 13 is actually geared towards the music industry, which has some detrimental effects for that. So going back to the first point, where it contradicts the right of our fair use, U.S. fair use, Europe actually has permitted use. They don't have fair use. And that means that to review any content, you actually need permission. Unlike fair use, where you don't need permission, as long as it goes under the guidelines of criticism, news reporting, educational purposes, etc. And with this Article 13, it's actually placing permitted use onto the internet that we use, regardless of that we have fair use. So a case to further support this is H3 Productions versus Matt Haas. Their YouTube channel, H3 Productions, is a YouTube channel. Matt Haas is also another YouTube channel in which H3 Productions was reviewing some content from Matt Haas, and they won under the Fair Use Protection Act, or account. And it is a recent case which shows how we're still struggling with fair use. And with Article 13, well, it would straight up eliminate all the efforts that have been put. And this case actually was kind of progressing the fair use that we can exercise in social media, in which the BBC article states that they have won a legal case which could affect all YouTubers. And this leads on to the second point, in which a great amount of social media platforms have a lot of shared material that is at risk for Article 13 to be eliminated. And that's because since social media platforms are now responsible for the copyrighted material, they're going to block any material from channels automatically, because they don't want to have any potential liabilities. And YouTube, the CEO of YouTube actually has spoke out against this to further support this idea. CEO Susan Wojcicki posted on the YouTube Creators Google blog, where she talks about the video Despacito, and there's a lot of parodies about it, and she talks about how videos like that would actually be automatically blocked, where she says that the uncertainty means that we might have to block videos like this to avoid liability under Article 13. And in another blog, in the same YouTube Creators Google blog, she also states that Article 13 threatens the hundreds of thousands of jobs European creators, businesses, artists, and everyone they employ. Further supporting the idea of how much content would potentially be blocked, there's a letter to the chair from Parliament on page 4/8. That's how the number of the page is. paragraph 6, the letter to the chair states, online content sharing service providers and right holders shall cooperate in good faith in order to ensure that unauthorized copyrighted content is not available on their services. So this is actually on the proposal of Article 13 on page 15 and section 1B. And it means that all social media platforms, including the ones in US, have to go along with Article 13. So it's not just affecting Europe, it's affecting all online platforms. And leading to the third point, since it contradicts a fair use and it blocks a lot of content, it limits the freedom of expression of smaller creators. Since YouTube or other social media platforms don't know for sure that smaller creators are actually releasing content that isn't theirs. So, and it actually, in the European Parliament news, it actually does say that it's geared towards the music industry and protects the rights, but it also sacrifices some of the freedom of expression of smaller creators. And in the European Parliament news article that talks about this, it states, Parliament's position toughens the Commission's proposal plans to make platforms and aggregators liable for copyright infringement. So this would also apply to snippets, or what they call snippets. So even small amounts of copyright material would actually be blocked. And so this leads on to another kind of sub-point is memes. Article 13 is also known as the meme ban for a reason. And it's because memes have, memes are, they come in a variety of forms. And the way the EU describes them is caricatures, parody, or pastiche. And the definition of a meme is limited to only those three forms, when in reality, there's many forms. So, and memes are a form of expression, especially among teenagers. So, in conclusion, because our fair use is threatened and the blockage of a great amount of content and our freedom of expression is limited, Article 13 has detrimental effects that outweigh the beneficial ones.
All right, well, you identify the topic and the proposition pretty clearly. So we've got Article 13, and your argument is that the negative consequences are going to outweigh whatever benefits there are. We never really get a discussion of what the benefits would be. You make a reference to how it's designed to benefit the music industry, but we don't really get any sense of, so what difference is it going to make, or what difference do people think it's going to make? So as in assessing the harms, it's awfully hard to do that. There's a good preview of what the supporting content is going to be in the speech, so we know where you're headed, and I think that that's fine. You signpost the supporting points pretty clearly on the first, on all 3 points actually. It's not one place in particular, although the labeling on those claims could be a little bit clearer. The fair use issue, for instance, on that first point seems to suggest that we're going to be shifting to permitted use, and that might be the simplest way to say that claim that Article 13 is going to force the world to shift from fair use to permitted use, and that permitted use has particular harms to it, and that those harms have long-term consequences to us. Maybe that would be the way to develop that argument. Like I said, the signpost on the other points is pretty solid. The description of what the policy is supposed to do is okay. I still think it could be a little bit clearer, especially when it comes to the thing that you're talking about at the end on the memes. The notion that copyrighted material could be utilized by somebody else for fair use purposes, and you're suggesting that that's going to come to an end. Well, how will that change things? What is the consequence to that? At best, you have, well, I don't get to say things, or I don't get to use somebody else's words to say something that I want to say, or somebody else's creativity to say something I want to say, and I need to know why that is an important thing. I think there are other things that are also important on this subject that maybe could use a little bit of development. There are economic consequences. There's a lot of business that's conducted on these platforms, for instance, and that these policies could threaten that. I think that might be a more practical way of talking about this. You kind of leave it at the esoteric level about people's freedom of expression, and I'm not saying that that's an unimportant issue. I'm just wondering, especially since they're using somebody else's words and materials, what free expression. I mean, it already exists. The idea already exists. So what's being suppressed? What's being harmed in some way? What's the consequence of it? I think you need to have a stronger argument on that. You cited your sources pretty consistently, although there was a question about what happened with that case with H3 versus whatever group it was, Matt Haas. And again, I know that you said that there was an outcome. You want to give us the source on that outcome, and if there's speculation as to what the consequence is going to be in that outcome, you should probably be putting that in that particular spot. Let's see. The quote from the chair of YouTube was perfectly fine, suggesting that there could be long-term consequences. There's uncertainty that the platform providers are going to start screening things out substantially. Again, I think you need to show us why that's a bad thing, because a lot of people might turn around and say, good, there's less crap on the internet. How many damn cat videos do I need? How many times does a meme have to show up before I get sick of it? And I don't think you want people to take that attitude toward what you're saying. I especially don't want the argument to be made that says somebody else gets to decide this sort of thing. But I'm not sure how you get to that without having a substantial value argument, and that's maybe a little bit of a problem because this assignment is supposed to be about a claim of fact. Let's see. Oh, no, that's fine. All right, thank you. I've gone